So the debate about Julius Malema encouraging young people of Zimbabwe to go back home still rages on. People are still debating about it. I remember yesterday I did a video about the same topic. And to say that people were frustrated, it's an understatement. You know, yesterday I got to understand that South Africans are actually hurt by what Julius Malema has been saying over the years. I remember people yesterday saying that, Thomas, please, we understand that you are passionate about the issues of Zimbabwe. You want Zimbabwe to be free from the evil regime that is destroying that beautiful country. You want the people of Zimbabwe to go back home and build their families and build their country. But please do not be fooled by Julius Malema. You need to understand that this is the same person that was insulting us South Africans and calling us names because he wanted to protect illegal immigrants. This is the same person that called the South Africans Afrophobes and xenophobic simply because the South Africans were expressing their frustrations about the issue of illegal immigration into the country. This is the same person that was encouraging illegal immigrants to find creative ways to enter the country. This is the same person that said that South Africans must fight for employment opportunities with illegal immigrants. So, Thomas, we know that you are passionate about Zimbabwe. You want Zimbabwe to be free from the evil regime that is destroying that beautiful country. You want the people of Zimbabwe to go back home, build their families and build their lives, and eventually build their country. But do not be fooled by Julius Malema. He is saying all of these things because he realizes that the support of the EFF is plummeting. Julius Malema is saying all of these things to save his political career. So just because he's saying what South Africans have been saying over the years, it doesn't mean that he means it. He's saying it because he wants to benefit somehow. And please make no mistake, if this person is elected as the president of the country, he's still going to implement the policies that are going to destroy the country. So as much as I would like to focus on the topic at hand, I really got to appreciate and understand how you people are actually feeling about Julius Malema. And I feel like maybe before Julius Malema starts talking about this issue of illegal immigration, maybe he needs to start addressing South Africans and maybe starts to appreciate what he has been saying over the years and maybe apologizing for it. Because yesterday, this is the same sentiment that I got, that there is nothing wrong with encouraging Zimbabweans to go back home and fight for their country. But if this is the person that is going to do that, there's going to be questions around it. People are going to start trying to figure out what is it exactly that he's trying to benefit by saying all of these things that South Africans have been saying over the years. What is it that he's trying to benefit from encouraging Zimbabweans to go back home and fight for their country? This is someone that has been pro-illegal immigration for all this time. So let's try to see what is it that he's trying to benefit. So I actually got to understand that South Africans are still hurt by what Julius Malema has been saying, and because they haven't actually apologized, I feel like South Africans have not healed from his utterances.
Quickly, just as we wrap up that thought, one of the things Malema has said is that he has, of course, urged Zimbabweans living in South Africa to return home to vote during the elections. I mean, I wonder what that does for the debate for those that are living here and see the situation in Zimbabwe. One of another debates that have come up this week, for instance, is the issue of what it costs for Zimbabweans living in South Africa to renew their passports. They've seen a 50% increase to just the cost of getting their passports at the consulate here in Gauteng, and they've argued that this is the Zim government taking advantage of the situation of those that are in the country. I mean, what do you say to the Zimbabweans that are living in Zim, perhaps wanting to come back home? Is that something that you would encourage? And what do you say to those who say there's nothing to go home to?
Well, I must say that the situation is quite tough for most citizens. If you look at just the past year, we've had a number of Zimbabweans, hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans leaving the country because they are seeking other better and greener pastures, better opportunities. So to invite people back into hell, or to invite people back into this very difficult situation, I think would be disingenuous. We have to correct the settings. Yes, Zimbabweans have a role to play in elections, but the elections are actually not proper elections.
So if Chamisa is against the idea of Zimbabweans going back home to fight for their country, and at the same time saying that there has to be changes in how Zimbabwe operates, how is he actually expecting that to happen if he's against the idea of encouraging Zimbabweans to go back home and fight for their country? Because he's saying that Julius Malema inviting people back to hell is disingenuous. But at the same time, he says that there has to be changes. But truth of the matter is that the government that is running Zimbabwe, it is not a government that believes in constitution. For people to see changes in Zimbabwe, people will have to go to the streets. So how can those people go to the streets if they are in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and so on and so on? I mean, like, this is one thing that I don't understand. Because you say that inviting Zimbabweans to go back home, it's disingenuous. Maybe it's disingenuous because Julius Malema has been saying all of these things about illegal immigrants. Fine. But how do you expect Zimbabwe to be fixed if you don't want Zimbabweans to go back home? How do you think that how do you expect Zimbabweans to fight for their country if Zimbabweans are abroad? Because if you want Zimbabweans to stand up to that brutal regime of Mnangagwa, you have to invite Zimbabweans back home. You have to tell them that, guys, things are not good here at home. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to fight so that there can be systematical changes in the country. We're going to have to fight so that this system that has been oppressing us over the years is eventually changed. We're going to have to fight so that our votes can start counting. Our votes can start mattering. But if you're going to encourage Zimbabweans to go abroad, how do you expect Zimbabweans to go to actually fight for their country?
So even if Zimbabweans were to come, look at what happened in the past election. People were in the queues. The ballot papers were not there. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission could not produce right ballot papers. And it actually turned out that Mr. Mnangagwa's friend, Witness Chivayo, a business person,
that is the same thing that Zimbabweans must go back home and fight. This is the same thing that Zimbabweans must go back home and fight. Of course, like just going home and voting, it doesn't matter because who actually determines where the country goes are people who are going to do the counting, not the people that are voting. So Zimbabweans can go back home and vote, but they need to understand that voting is not going to count because the people that are going to count are the ones that are going to steal their democracy from them. So this is the reason why they're going to have to go to the streets and actually fight for things to change inside the government. This is why it is important to invite Zimbabweans to go back home to fight for the system to change, not to go back home to vote, because voting doesn't matter. They can vote. Millions of Zimbabweans can vote. But who is counting the votes is the one that actually can rob the democracy from the Zimbabweans.
Not proper elections. So even if Zimbabweans were to come, look at what happened in the past election. People were in the queues. The ballot papers were not there. The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission could not produce right ballot papers. And it actually turned out that Mr. Mnangagwa's friend, Witness Chivayo, a business person, who has actually printing the ballot papers, is the one who was playing the sabotage. The election was just a sham. So to talk of elections and Zimbabweans coming to those elections and participating is a bit of a challenge. But we have to fix our own issues. Zimbabweans have to fix our own issues. As regards the issue of passport.
Of course, how can Zimbabweans fix their own issues if they are abroad? Like, I'm struggling to understand the angle of Chamisa. How can Zimbabweans fix their own issues if they are abroad?
Even here at home, I spoke of the taxes that are too high. Even the passport, I think we are the highest in terms of charges for the passport. Why? Because they realize, the government, that Zimbabweans are leaving the country. So we have to deal with our own issues in a very and very comprehensive
so
manner.
how, let me let me ask you this, and then you can finish off that thought, but I'm running out of time here, Advocate Chamisa. But I think there's the issue that you have of a contentious one here in South Africa, where there is that strained relationship at times in communities where, you know, we've seen operations like Operation Dudula, for instance, that have come out and said, no, we have too many undocumented people in South Africa, particularly some coming from Zimbabwe. So what do we do about that very debate here in South Africa? Where would you like to see that discussion go?
Well, the key thing is for the South African government to help Zimbabweans help themselves. How do they do so? They do so by not expressing solidarity with dictatorship. They do so by helping Zimbabweans have proper processes, proper elections, and of course to resolve their politics. Right now,
man, like, please, man, wake up. South African government is not going to help the people of Zimbabwe. South African government, the ANC government, they are friends with the ZANU-PF. The ANC is friends with the ZANU-PF. So how do you expect the ANC not to stand side by side with ZANU-PF? The ANC is going to stand side by side with ZANU-PF. I mean, last time Mnangagwa was accused of rigging the elections, and guess what? Ramaphosa went to that sham of an inauguration of Mnangagwa. So if you're going to suggest for the South African government to help the people of Zimbabwe to help themselves, how is that going to happen when the South African government is standing with the ZANU-PF? They are not going to do that. It is not going to happen. If you think that the South African government is going to confront the ZANU-PF and say that, guys, we are not happy about how you treat the people of Zimbabwe. We are not happy about how you guys handle your matters. We are not happy about how you guys conduct your elections. Forget about it. This is not what the ANC is going to say. The ANC will never say all of these things. They will never say all of these things. So how do you expect the government of South Africa to actually help the people of Zimbabwe to help themselves? I mean, like, you know of the relationship between the ANC and ZANU-PF. So what actually makes you think that suddenly the ANC can turn 180 and start holding the ZANU-PF accountable? These are friends. These are friends. These are brother. You remember Julius Malema yesterday? Brother. Yeah. These are brother. So there is no way that the ANC is going to confront ZANU-PF. So that suggestion is already out. It's already out. The suggestion of South African government helping the people of Zimbabwe is already out.
Not expressing solidarity with dictatorship. They do so by helping Zimbabweans have proper processes, proper elections, and of course to resolve their politics. Right now, we have over 100 political activists who are incarcerated, political prisoners. There's no solidarity. There's no support from the countries that are supposed to support us. That solidarity will go a long way, particularly from the South African government. And also,
I guess the question is, how are you going to make the South African government to confront the ZANU-PF government? I think this is where the question is. Because as things stand, South African government actually stands with ZANU-PF. Yeah, Thomas, this is the government of national unity. Man, ANC has 40%. ANC has 40%. So how are you planning to encourage the ANC to turn their backs on ZANU-PF? How are you planning to make the ANC not to stand in solidarity with ZANU-PF? How are you planning to do that? Because if you're going to say that South African government must help the people of Zimbabwe, South African government must make sure that they hold these people accountable and make sure that we have fair elections and make sure that our politics is right and be vocal about the political prisoners that are rotting in Zimbabwe. Like, they are not going to do that. So how are you going to make them do that? How are you going to do that?
That solidarity will go a long way, particularly from the South African government. And also calling out what is not proper and making sure that they characterize evil for what it is. They cannot continue this thing of burying their head in the sand. We need to be able to articulate the issues as they are. It's a dictatorship and it must be dealt with. We can't have a black apartheid being endorsed just because by skin color it is the same color. We
Man, it has been endorsed. It has been endorsed. Who has actually stood up against ZANU-PF, man? You look at African Union, you look at South Africa, you look at all these countries inside. What is one country that actually has said that, guys, what's happening there, man? It is not okay. How many countries here in SADC that have said, guys, can we please try to pay attention to what's happening in Zimbabwe? Like, what's happening there in Zimbabwe, man? Something is not right. Who has said that? Who has?
We can't. And we have to be able to stand and defend, to say enough is enough. Zimbabwe must be fixed. What is broken must be corrected. And that is where we count on the South African brothers and sisters, to help us help ourselves.
All right. Mr. Chamisa, an absolute...
Nah, man, it feels like Chamisa actually doesn't want all of those things to actually be resolved, man. If you think that, or if you are going to bet on the ANC government to stand up against ZANU-PF, then clearly you don't want the Zimbabwean problems to actually be solved. You don't want anything to be solved in Zimbabwe if you are going to stand and wait for the ANC government to stand up against ZANU-PF. You don't want anything to be solved. You don't want the Zimbabweans to go back home because you believe that anyone who invites Zimbabweans to go back home, they are inviting them to hell, and it is not going to help the situation in any way. But at the same time, we have to fix Zimbabwe. We have to make sure that there is change within government. But how are you going to do that if you're still going to encourage Zimbabweans to stay abroad? How are you going to do that? And you are going to bet on South African government to help the people of Zimbabwe. The South African government is not going to do that. They are not going to do that. I mean, like, South Africans were so frustrated last time when Ramaphosa went to that bogus of an inauguration of Mnangagwa. People were furious that, man, you have millions and millions of Zimbabweans that are jumping the borders and coming into the country. Instead of you actually standing up against Mnangagwa and say, man, you need to fix your house because you can't fix your house. Now we have to deal with the problems that are coming from your house. No, he's not doing that. He's going to Mnangagwa's house and to say that you are doing an amazing job. You are doing an amazing job. So as far as Ramaphosa and the ANC are somehow still in charge of the country, there is no way that they are going to stand up against what's happening in Zimbabwe. Maybe if the DA be in charge, the DA is not going to listen to that. Maybe if the DA actually does that, maybe this is the reason, maybe this is the way to actually force ZANU-PF to actually act right. But as long as the ANC is somehow still in charge of the country, there is no way the problems of the people of Zimbabwe are going to be fixed. Those are just my 2 cents. Guys, please tell me what you think. Go to the comment section. Don't forget to hit that like button. And the most important part is subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabao. So I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.